sound of a deep, imperial war drum, slow and menacing, mixed with the static of a long-range scanner. For 1,000 years, the KRYLL hegemony has conquered. Star system after star system has fallen to their invincible armada. Their law is simple: submit or be erased. Now, their gaze falls upon a small, blue world in a forgotten sector. A world of soft-skinned bipeds, divided and chaotic. A species that has fought 14,000 wars against itself. They send a fleet to deliver the ultimatum. But what happens when the primitives don't beg? What happens when their ambassador looks a high lord in the eye and refuses to kneel? What happens when the galaxy's greatest conquerors discover that a history of constant warfare isn't a weakness, but the most brutal training regimen imaginable? You declared war on humanity, the galaxy's most dangerous species. Before the invasion begins, subscribe to the channel for more frontline dispatches, and engage the like button to bolster our defenses. Alright, let's begin the story. High Lord Malachur stood on the command bridge of the Indomitus. The vessel was a blade of black metal and crimson light, 30 kilometers long, the flagship of the KRYLL hegemony's expansionary fleet. Below him, on the primary holographic display, a small, blue-green marble rotated lazily. Earth. Analysis complete. High Lord, chirped Sublord Kale, his multifaceted eyes fixed on the data stream. His smaller, sleeker carapace was a stark contrast to Malachur's own hulking, battle-scarred frame. Malachur's mandibles clicked, a sound like shearing metal. Report. Species designation: human. Bipedal, soft-skinned, carbon-based. Technologically, primitive. They still use chemical rockets to leave their own gravity well. Their primary weapons are kinetic projectiles and crude fission devices. Malachur let out a low rumble that passed for laughter. Fission devices. They play with atomic firecrackers. And their society. Chaotic, my lord. Kale replied with undisguised contempt. They are fractured into hundreds of competing tribes they call nations. Our xenologists have cataloged over 14,000 distinct wars in their recorded history. They are a species at war with itself. Excellent, Malachur rumbled. A species that cannot stop killing itself will never unite to fight us. It is the same story we have seen on 1,000 worlds. For millennia, the KRYLL hegemony had expanded. Their doctrine was flawless. Find a world. Evaluate its strength. If it was weak, issue the ultimatum. Submission or annihilation. Every species they had encountered had made the logical choice. There is one other thing. High Lord. Kale hesitated. The humans have requested a meeting. They wish to discuss peaceful contact. Malachur turned his massive head, his 4 crimson eyes fixing on his subordinate. Peaceful? They think they have something to negotiate with. It was amusing. A welcome diversion before the inevitable conquest. Grant them their meeting, Malachur commanded. I will hear their pleas myself. It will be entertaining. 3 days later, Ambassador Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of a KRYLL warship. The air was thick with ozone and the faint, acrid scent of the insectoid race. She and her 2 aides were the only soft-skinned beings in a chamber of armored warriors. Before her, on a raised throne, sat High Lord Malachur. He was even larger in person, a living engine of war. Human, Malachur's voice boomed, the translator implant turning his chittering into harsh, guttural English. You have requested this audience. I trust you are here to offer your species unconditional submission. Eva met his gaze without flinching. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, but her voice was calm. Of independence? Your entire species huddles on one insignificant planet. Your weapons could not scratch the hull of this ship. What makes you think you have a choice? Eva took a small step forward. Because you made a mistake in your analysis, High Lord. Oh, and what is that? You studied our history of fighting, she said, her voice dropping, becoming sharp as a razor. All 14,000 wars. You saw a divided, chaotic species. A weakness. She paused. You missed the most important detail. You saw what we do to each other, our enemies. You never stopped to ask what we do to outsiders who threaten us all. Her eyes narrowed. When that happens, we stop fighting each other. And we start fighting you. Humanity does not surrender. Malachur stared at the small, soft creature before him. There was no fear in her eyes. No pleading. Only a cold, hard certainty that chilled him in a way he hadn't felt in centuries. He found it irritating. "You have one of your weeks to reconsider," Malachar announced, rising from his throne. "Inform your leaders. The hegemony has offered you a merciful path. If you refuse it, I will bring my war fleet to your world and teach you the meaning of despair." "We appreciate the warning," Rostova said, turning to leave. "But our answer won't change." As the humans departed, Sublord Kale approached his commander. "Shall I mobilize the war fleet, High Lord?" "Yes," Malachar replied, watching the tiny human shuttle depart. "But only a punitive fleet. Sublord Kale, you will take the third fleet. 300 ships. It should be more than enough to break their foolish pride." He had no idea. He had just made the greatest mistake in the history of the galaxy. Sublord Kale's fleet of 300 KRYLL destroyers dropped out of hyperspace near the human colony on Titan. It was a pathetic sight. A few pressurized domes clinging to the surface of Saturn's largest moon. A mining operation. Population, 3,000 humans. Standard procedure. Kale ordered his tactical officer. Demand their surrender. When they refuse, make an example of one of their domes. The rest will fall in line. The communication channel opened. A human face appeared on the screen, a man with a graying beard and tired eyes. Dirt was smudged on his cheek. "This is Station Chief Marcus Cole. You're trespassing in a restricted mining zone. Can I help you?" Kale's mandibles twitched in annoyance. "This is Sublord Kale of the KRYLL hegemony. You are now under our control. Surrender immediately, and you will not be harmed." The human, Marcus, looked confused. "Surrender? Son, this is a civilian mining operation. We dig rocks. We're not soldiers." "That is irrelevant," Kale replied. "Your species was given a choice. You have 30 seconds to power down your systems and prepare for boarding." The human was quiet for a moment. Then a slow grin spread across his face. "Well, boys," he said, looking away from the camera. "Looks like the coffee break's over. Time to get to work." The channel cut out. Kale stared at the empty screen. "Get to work?" "Sir," his sensor operator shouted. "The humans are moving. They're launching vessels from the surface." Kale watched the tactical display in disbelief. Tiny, clumsy ships were lifting off from the colony. They weren't warships. They were industrial haulers, designed for moving ore. And they were flying directly at his fleet. "What are they doing?" Kale muttered. The answer came when the first hauler, overloaded with raw, volatile rocket fuel, slammed into the side of one of his destroyers. The explosion was immense. It tore through the ship's kinetic barriers and cracked its hull, venting atmosphere and crew into the void. Before Kale could react, 2 more mining ships crashed into his fleet. Their pilots made no attempt to evade fire. They made no attempt to eject. "Return fire!" Kale shrieked. "Destroy them all!" The KRYLL destroyers opened up with their plasma cannons. The human mining craft were annihilated, blown apart in silent, fiery blossoms. But they kept coming. For every hauler they destroyed, another seemed to take its place, a relentless, suicidal swarm. Within an hour, the mining station on Titan was a smoking crater. But so were 6 KRYLL destroyers. 6 state-of-the-art warships gone. And over 800 KRYLL warriors were dead. The cost, it was illogical. "Sir," his communications officer said, his voice trembling. "We re-intercepting the colony's final broadcast. They transmitted everything before they died. Our shield frequencies, weapon charge times, armor composition analysis from the impacts. Who are they transmitting to?" Kale demanded. "Every human settlement in this system, sir. And beyond. To Earth." Kale felt a cold dread creep through his carapace. The humans hadn't been fighting. They had been gathering data. They had sacrificed 3,000 of their own kind, their own civilians, just to learn how to fight him. "Move to the next target," he ordered, his voice suddenly unsteady. "The research outpost on Europa." On Europa, the pattern repeated, but with a horrifying new twist. The scientists, seeing the KRYLL fleet approach, didn't fight with ships. They turned their laboratory equipment into weapons. Particle accelerators became makeshift cannons. Cryolasers, meant for sample collection, were repurposed to freeze sections of KRYLL hulls. When it was clear they couldn't win, the station's director, a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne, broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice was calm, eerily calm. This is Director Thorne to all human forces. We are transmitting complete tactical data on KRYLL shield harmonics and energy weapon patterns. We have identified a structural weakness in their ventral armor plating. We are uploading the schematics now. Use this information. She paused. Make them pay for every inch. Then she detonated the station's experimental fusion reactor. The explosion was a miniature star. It vaporized 12 KRYLL destroyers instantly and crippled 20 more. But more importantly, the data from her sacrifice reached Earth in seconds. On Earth, in the underground command center of the United Earth Defense Fleet, Admiral Kenji Tanaka watched the reports. Each lost colony was a wound, but each sacrifice was a lesson bought in blood. Sir, his aide said quietly, the outer colonies are gone, but we have it. A complete tactical profile of the KRYLL Third Fleet. We know how they fight. We know how their ships work. We know where they are vulnerable. Tanaka nodded grimly. Then they did not die for nothing. He turned to his tactical display, where the 30 ships of Earth's first shield fleet waited in the shadow of Jupiter. Begin Phase 2, he ordered. Send a message to all ships. He paused. Remember Europa. Sublord Kale was beginning to understand. He had made a terrible mistake. His easy conquest had cost him 32 ships and thousands of soldiers. The humans were supposed to be weak, divided. Instead, they fought with a coordinated, suicidal ferocity he had never seen. What worried him most was their communications. They weren't screaming or pleading. They spoke in calm, professional voices. Titan's sacrifice confirmed their point defense cannon limitations. All units, adjust approach vectors accordingly. Europa's data is in. Exploit the ventral armor weakness. Focus fire. Acceptable losses for this engagement are calculated at 85%. Proceed with the objective. They talked about their own deaths like it was a business transaction. Sir, his tactical officer called out. We're approaching the Jupiter defense line. Long-range sensors detect human military vessels. Kale looked at the display. Finally, the human military. 30 ships. Pathetically small. But they weren't running. They weren't hiding. They were waiting for him. And Kale realized, with a surge of pure terror, that he had not been fighting a war. He had been the final, bloody test in humanity's training simulation. And now, class was over. Captain Eva Rostova, former ambassador, now captain of the UES Defiance, gripped the arms of her command chair. 268 enemy ships against her 30. A sane commander would retreat. A sane species would surrender. But humanity had stopped being sane the moment the first dome on Titan cracked. Captain, her tactical officer, Lieutenant Kim, reported. Enemy fleet is moving into attack formation. Pattern, 7 approach. Same one they used at Europa. Arrogant. Eva nodded. That arrogance was about to cost them everything. All ships, this is Defiance, she broadcast. Execute protocol, Thermopylae. Remember the price that was paid for this information. Make it count. The 30 human ships spread out. To the KRYLL, it looked like a standard defensive line. A foolish, doomed gesture. Sublord Kale watched with satisfaction. Begin the attack. Target their command ship first. Break their spirit. The KRYLL fleet unleashed a storm of plasma. The human ships didn't dodge. They didn't retreat. They simply charged forward, absorbing the impacts, their hulls glowing cherry red. Their shields are failing. Kale's weapons officer reported. But they're still advancing. Eva felt her ship shudder as another blast struck their bow. Sparks flew. Smoke filled the bridge. The Defiance was dying, but it held its course. Captain, Kim shouted over the alarms. We're at optimal range. All ships. Eva broadcast, her voice ringing with cold purpose. Execute. Now. What happened next would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. The human ships didn't fire their main weapons. They became the weapons. The Defiance, its engines overloading, its hull screaming in protest, slammed into the command cruiser of the KRYLL fleet. Not a random collision. A precise, calculated strike at the exact angle needed to bypass its shields and penetrate the primary reactor housing. As KRYLL boarding parties swarmed into her dying ship, they found corridors rigged with explosives. They found a skeleton crew of volunteers, armed with crude projectile shotguns, waiting for them in the narrow passageways. The last thing the boarders saw was a wounded human engineer, his face split in a bloody grin, holding a detonator. His last words, broadcast to the entire human fleet, were data package on their internal armor composition is away. Good hunting. Across the battle, 29 other human ships were making similar sacrifices. Each captain had studied the data. Each crew had a specific target, a specific vulnerability. A small frigate, the Saratoga, dove directly into the engine exhaust of a KRYLL battleship, detonating its own reactor and crippling the massive vessel. A corvette, the Lexington, allowed itself to be captured, then blew its munitions bay once inside the enemy hangar, destroying 3 other ships from the inside. The KRYLL fleet, which had entered the battle with absolute superiority, found itself crippled and in chaos. 30 human ships had destroyed or disabled over 100 enemy vessels. Sublord Kale, his own ship heavily damaged, stared at the tactical display in utter shock. "Sir," his comms officer stammered. We are still intercepting their transmissions. Even as they die, they are broadcasting detailed scans of our fleet, tactical responses, weaknesses." He watched as the few surviving human ships, battered but still fighting, began implementing new tactics based on the data sent by their dying comrades. They moved in patterns he'd never seen, exploiting weaknesses in KRYLL formations that the KRYLL themselves never knew they had. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it was over, the human fleet was gone, every ship destroyed. But so was 60% of Kale's invasion force. As Kale gave the order to limp back to hegemony space, his intelligence officer brought him a report that made his blood run cold. "Sublord, we have been studying human history. Their concept of warfare, it is different." "Explain." "They have schools for it. Universities. They teach courses on strategy, tactics, something they call military history. They have been preparing for this kind of war since before they could even leave their planet." He paused, his manipulators trembling. "Sir, there's one more thing. We intercepted a high-level communication from their home world, from Admiral Tanaka." "What did it say?" "He designated this engagement as Phase 1, Active Reconnaissance. He reported that the enemy's tactical doctrines have been analyzed and countermeasures are being developed." The officer looked at Kale, his eyes wide with terror. "Sir, everything we have faced, the miners, the scientists, this fleet, it was just their screening force, their test. According to the transmission, their main battle fleets haven't even been deployed yet." Kale looked out at the starfield, at the wreckage of his once mighty fleet. He had come here to conquer a world of primitives. Instead, he had just served as the final exam for a species that had turned war into an art form. And now, their real armies were coming.